All right, let's get right into it. Every single country out there, from the biggest economic superpower to the smallest island nation, is up against the exact same fundamental economic puzzle. It's this constant balancing act, a choice with no perfect answer, and it literally shapes their financial destiny. Today, we're going to unpack that puzzle, the Impossible Trinity.
This concept is so powerful and so inescapable that economists have given it some pretty dramatic nicknames. One of the best? The Unholy Trinity. Yeah, that kind of tells you just how difficult this thing is to manage.
Okay, so to get why it's called impossible, we first have to understand the three things that pretty much every country wants. These are the three big goals, the desirable, but, as we'll see, totally conflicting goals that are at the very heart of this puzzle.
First up, a stable exchange rate. Pretty simple, right? It just means the value of your money doesn't jump all over the place day after day. Now, if you're a business trying to sell your stuff overseas, or maybe an investor who wants to build a factory, that kind of predictability is absolute gold. It takes a huge amount of risk off the table.
All right, number two, every country, and I mean every country, loves the idea of free capital movement. This means no walls, no barriers, money can flow in to start new companies and create jobs, and it can flow right back out just as easily. It's basically the hallmark of an open, modern, and very attractive economy.
And the final piece of our puzzle is having an independent monetary policy. This one is all about control. It's about being in the driver's seat of your own economy. It's the power for a central bank to raise or lower interest rates, to fight off a recession, or to cool down inflation. Basically, to manage the economy for its own people.
So, let's recap. You've got these three fantastic goals: a stable currency, open borders for money, and total control over your own economy. But here's the catch. The brutal, simple truth of the Impossible Trinity is, you can pick any two you want, but you can never, ever have all three at the same time.
So why not? I mean, why can't a country just have it all? Well, it boils down to this incredibly powerful force called arbitrage, and that's really just a fancy word for smart investors finding a way to make a risk-free profit. The thing is, once they start doing that, the whole system can come crashing down. Let's see exactly how.
Okay, let's walk through this step by step to see how the trap is sprung. Imagine a country is locked in goals 1 and 2, a fixed exchange rate and totally open capital flows. But then it gets a little greedy. It tries to sneak in goal number 3 by lowering its interest rates to give its own economy a boost. Well, instantly, investors all over the world see a golden opportunity. They can borrow money for super cheap in that country, immediately sell that country's currency, and then go invest it somewhere else with higher interest rates for a guaranteed profit. But all that selling puts massive downward pressure on the currency. So to keep its exchange rate fixed, the central bank has to start buying up its own currency using its foreign reserves. The problem? Those reserves aren't a bottomless pit. Eventually they're going to run out, the fixed rate breaks, and the currency tanks. The attempt to have all three goals just ended in total failure.
Now, this isn't just some theory in a dusty old textbook. It is a very real choice that every single country has to make, whether they do it explicitly or not. And if we look around the world and back through history, we can see these trade-offs playing out everywhere.
This table lays it all out perfectly. Look at the Bretton Woods system after World War II. The major economies chose a stable exchange rate and their own independent policy. The price? They had to give up free capital flow. Now, contrast that with the modern US or the UK. They go for free capital flow and an independent policy, but they have to accept that their exchange rate is going to bounce around. And then you have the Eurozone. Its members get a perfectly stable exchange rate, the euro, and free capital flow with each other. But the trade-off is huge. They each give up their own independent monetary policy to a central bank. See? 3 different systems, 3 different choices from the menu.
For decades, this whole framework seemed to explain the world pretty well. But then, the 1990s hit. You had the Mexican peso crisis, the Asian financial crisis. One after another, countries were getting slammed by money suddenly fleeing their borders. It became painfully clear that the game had changed and the original puzzle was missing a really important piece.
The crises of the 90s were so devastating that they basically forced economists and policymakers to add a 4th goal to the list. This wasn't just a nice-to-have anymore. It became an urgent, top-priority objective.
And just like that, the trilemma became the quadrilemma. So now countries weren't just juggling exchange rates, capital flows, and monetary policy. They were also desperately trying to prevent the kind of massive financial meltdowns that could destroy an entire economy almost overnight. So how do you even try to achieve this new goal of financial stability?
Well, the main strategy that popped up, especially in emerging markets, was basically self-insurance. They started to stockpile enormous amounts of foreign currency, mostly US dollars, building up a giant war chest to protect themselves in a future crisis.
And the scale of this change was just incredible. After seeing the chaos of the Asian financial crisis, countries in that region went on an absolute buying spree. By 2005, emerging Asia's holdings of international reserves had ballooned to 25% of their entire GDP, a quarter of their whole economy just sitting in the bank as a defense mechanism.
But just as the world was getting its head around this new, more complicated puzzle, another challenge came along. A few economists started asking a pretty radical question. In our super-connected world today, is there really a choice of pick two anymore? Or has the puzzle been crunched down to just a dilemma? Pick one.
This whole new debate was really kicked off by the economist Helen Ray. She pointed out that, let's be honest, the world's financial system has a center of gravity, and that's the US and its monetary policy. So her question was basically this: does a decision made in Washington, D.C. create such massive waves that it just swamps everyone else, no matter what path they choose?
And this chart here really nails the debate. On one side, you have the classic trilemma. It says if you let your exchange rate float, you can have your own independent monetary policy. But on the other side is Ray's dilemma. It argues that in a world where capital flows freely, that independence is just an illusion. Your exchange rate doesn't really protect you. You've only got one real choice. Either you follow the lead of the U.S. Federal Reserve, or you have to build walls and restrict capital from moving at all.
So who's right? Well, like with most big questions in economics, the truth is kind of messy, somewhere in the middle. Research shows the original trilemma is definitely still a thing. Having a flexible exchange rate really does give you a buffer against global shocks. But, and this is a huge but, Ray was definitely onto something. This global financial cycle, driven by the US, is very real. The US economy is just so massive that its policies ripple out and affect everybody. So the choice for most countries isn't if they'll be affected, it's more like how much.
And that all leaves us with one final massive question to chew on. The Impossible Trinity started out as a neat little economic model, but where it's ended up forced us to think about what sovereignty even means in our globalized world. I mean, when trillions of dollars can cross borders in the blink of an eye, is any nation's economy ever truly, completely its own?